ใครเชียร์ไม่ได้มีแต่ความจริงใจแล้วเข้าใจกันเท่านั้นแหละที่ทำให้เชียร์อยู่กับเธอได้ดูสิเธอไม่ได้รวยมากเรียกว่าไม่ได้เป็นแบบทั่วไปอะนะเงินอะไม่ได้ว่ามีเงินมากมายเชียร์ถึงชอบเธอแล้วหน้าตาเธอก็ไม่ได้ว่าแบบพวกแบบเน็ตไอดอลอะไรอย่างเงี้ยนะก็แบบสวยในแบบของเธอเงินก็มีในแบบของเธอเชียร์ก็ชอบในแบบของเธอไม่ว่าพวกไหนคงไม่รู้ไงว่าคิดว่าเฮ้ยเชียร์ต้องเอาแบบผู้หญิงสวยๆเราก็รวยๆมาดึงเชียร์ไปต่อให้สวยรวยแค่ไหนรับหรือเข้ากับเชียร์ไม่ได้ก็แค่นั้นแหละ
เฮ้ยไม่สวยแต่ปอกไข่สวยเนี่ยเห็นไหม
จริงด้วย
หน้าตาไม่เป็นไรงานบ้านไม่เรียบคนสวยก็ทำไม่เป็นเราเหมือนเรา
ก็สวยทั้งสวยทั้งเก่ง
ทำทุกอย่างเป็น
สวยด้วยรวยอีก
ทำอะไรเป็นหมด
อันนี้ก็รวยละรวยจิตใจรวยน้ำใจ
ตัดท่อน้ำซ่อมไฟทำเพราะคนสวยทำได้ไหมไม่ได้
ซ่อมเครื่องผ้าของสายไฟอยากเอามาเผื่อเธอ
ของเราอ่ะพอดีข้าวสุกพอดีใช้เวลาไม่นาน
เดี๋ยวเชื่อทำนัตตี้จริงนะ
ดีนั่นเราไม่ได้กินอาหารนั่นน่ะอาหารมันไม่ใช่อาหารเนื้อดิบแบบที่คนเขากินกันนะ
ประเทศดาวอะ
คนไทยนี่เล็กมันเนื้องัวมันเป็นเชื้อโรคไงกินสดไงสำหรับคนอีสาน90%เขากินนะไอ้ที่เนื้อดิบๆแล้วก็มาจิ้มน้ำจิ้ม
น่าแต่นั้นมันก็เหลือแต่กลุ่มอะนะ
มันมีเชื้อโรค
คนอีสานเขาก็ไม่ได้กินกันหมดทุกคน
แต่ว่าเยอะส่วนมากกินดีนั่นเรากินทุกอย่างแต่เราไม่ได้กินสด
คนยังบอกเลยว่าคนเขาชอบเหมารวมอ่ะอย่างเช่นเหมารวมว่าคนพม่าสกปรกหรือว่าคนลาวกินหมาอย่างเงี้ยชอบไปเหมาอย่างนั้นหรือว่าเวียดนามกินหมาอะไรเงี้ยเหมารวม
มันกินอะไรก็กินเถอะท้องเขา
หรือว่าแต่คนอินเดียสกปรกอย่างเงี้ยมันก็ไม่ใช่คนไทยก็มีสกปรก
เยอะ
ๆคนลาวก็มีสกปรกคนสะอาดก็มีอินเดียก็มีสะอาดเหมือนกันแล้วก็รวยด้วย
บางคนสวยๆห้องขยะเต็มไม่ว่าคนอะไรมีหมด
เฮ้ยไลฟ์ผิดนี่วะ
ไลฟ์อะไร
เดี๋ยวต้องไลฟ์อีกอันนึงไม่ได้ออกเอาไว้เงี้ยแหละถ้ามีคนเข้ามาค่อยว่ากันนะมีเข้ามาเปล่านะ
มันจะเข้าแล้วเตี้ย
ถ้าเข้าเราค่อยหยุดลงไลฟ์แบบพีกอะลงไลฟ์แล้วเราค่อยไลฟ์ใหม่เพื่อเชิญเขาเข้ามาในอย่างการเข้ามาได้มันต้องมี Facebook นะถ้าไม่มี Facebook ก็เข้ามาไม่ได้
ข้าวมันเพิ่งได้มันยังแฉะ
เหรอ
เดี๋ยวให้เลเจียทำเลยเสร็จเดี๋ยวก็ตัดกินเสร็จแล้วก็ไปทำคลิปแบบ
ข้าวไป
พอดีเจียทำอะไรเสร็จตักข้าวทีหลังข้าวมันจะได้หายแฉะมันเพิ่งสุก
ใครจะเข้ามาก็ต้องแอด Facebook แชร์ได้ก่อนนะดูซิว่าคนจริงบ้าง
มันไม่เหมือนTikTokกดเชิญเนี่ย
Facebook ก็เชิญได้ทุกคนเลย
ลาบไก่
อันนี้มันเหมือนค่อนข้างจะส่วนตัวหน่อย YouTube อ่ะมันเชิญได้เฉพาะคนที่อันนี้แล้วคนที่เข้ามาคุยก็คนอื่นไม่เห็นนะแล้วก็ไม่ได้ยินเสียงด้วย ครับใส่แล้วก็ผัด
ผัดเจียวอ่ะ
ใช่เหรอไม่ใช่ผัดบวบอ่ะแตงกวา
นั่นแหละ
แตงกวาใส่ไข่
นั่นแหละไม่ชื่อ
เปรี้ยวหวานนั้นเบาหวานไม่เคยกินมีพวกพริกหยวกไอ้
ผัดแตงกวาใส่ไข่ใส่ลูกชิ้น
ใส่ไข่ไม่มีลูกชิ้น
มันเหมือนลูกชิ้นกับไก่อ่ะ
ไม่ใช่เดี๋ยวโอเคเราในพี่พ่อในไม่เจอ time to eat breakfast
พี่จะได้กินข้าวเช้า
in the morning is breakfast นี่กล้วยดำมาแล้วพอดีอ่ะตัวนี้พอดีก็หมดแล้ววันนี้ไม่มีเหลือ1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16โอ้ย16โอ้ครั้งแรกในชีวิต16อันเนี่ยอ่ะปกติถ้ากล้วยหอมก็นี่16ลูกอ่ะก็กิน8อันถ้าต้องวันก็กินอีก8จริงๆฉันก็กิน8อันหรือ10อันต่อวันกินไม่หมดก็เอาไว้ครับพวกนี้
ไม่ได้ของพ่อนะคนมาส่ง
จะสั่งอะไรครับ
ตรงเต็มอะไรเงี้ย
อ๋อต้องเป็นตัวของตัวเองแม้จะไม่มีใครดูเราก็ตามเรา
คน
ก็จะ
จะ
ไลฟ์
ชอ
ทุ
บ
กวัน
แนะนำแกให้ทำให้ทำ
แนะนำเชียร์ไม่ได้หรอเราเป็นตัวของตัวเองคนที่แนะนำเขาต้องทำให้เห็นก่อนนะเมื่อวานก็ใส่10 ลูกอันนี้ถ้าเหลือก็เอาไปกินสนิทมันจะไม่ดำอ่ะคุ้มไปอ่ะ20 บาทไม่คนเยอะ
Today on Forbes, from Elon Musk's assistant to SpaceX investor, meet Alyssa Butterfield. In 2016, when she was 25 years old, Alyssa Butterfield, a Los Angeles native working in the entertainment industry, accepted a new job that would change her life. She went to work for Elon Musk. At the time, Musk was not the household figure he is today. He was worth closer to $10 billion, or 38 times less than he is now. For 2 years, as one of Musk's team of executive assistants, Butterfield helped manage her mercurial boss's calendar and ever-changing priorities. from rescuing kids in a cave in Thailand to tunneling holes in Tesla's parking lot. She coordinated calls with investors, moved around meetings, and juggled Musk's wide-ranging portfolio, from Tesla and SpaceX duties to his eccentric extracurriculars and new ventures. In 2018, she graduated to operational roles at both Tesla and SpaceX, before leaving Musk's payroll in 2022. A former SpaceX employee says, quote, "I got the impression she was incredibly loyal and must have been incredibly effective." Now, Butterfield is capitalizing on her experience and connections. Since she joined Los Angeles-based venture capital firm Island Green Capital Management in 2024, the firm has made investments in xAI and SpaceX, Musk's two fastest-growing companies. Island Green, founded in 2023 by former Goldman Sachs trader Atif Ahluwalia, was one of at least 61 investors to participate in xAI's $6 billion investment round last May, which valued the startup at $24 billion, according to PitchBook.
เป็นไอ้พวกนั้นแหละ
In January, Island Green bought a stake in SpaceX from an unknown seller, likely at a valuation of around $350 billion, which the company hit last December in a $1.25 billion share sale. Island Green's SpaceX bet was through a special purpose vehicle, a structure popular with investors clamoring to get a piece of SpaceX and willing to pay a fee, according to a person familiar with the matter. Island Green's Musk-linked bets have already appreciated on paper. xAI raised an additional $6 billion in November at a $50 billion valuation. The valuation hit $80 billion in Musk's merger in March between xAI and his social
ของ
media
Facebook
company
อะ
X.
จะบอกไม่
And
ได้
now
เล่น
Musk is
ลบไป
reportedly
นานนะ
seeking to raise even more money for xAI
ตั้งแต่คุย
at
อะ
a
ก็คุยใน
so-called
นี้สิ
proper
นะ
value,
ฉันไม่
one
คุย
that
ช่อง
Bloomberg
ทางอื่น
recently
อะ
suggested could be as high as $120 billion. Likewise, SpaceX shares are now trading in secondary markets at valuations of between $380 billion to $400 billion, according to market data trackers GM Insights and Caplight. Island Green has also backed Impulse Space, the startup of another SpaceX alum, Tom Mueller,
สงสัย
who was one of the
ก่อนจะ
rocket
ไปเชียร์
maker's
อยู่ไหน
first
สดก็คงไป
employees
ส่องใน
and lead
ยู
engineer
ทูบ
on
เชีย
his
ร์ว่า
rocket.
ดูว่าเชียร์เป็นยังไง
Butterfield's firm participated in a $150 million fundraising round last October, which valued the startup at $510 million, according to PitchBook. Before Butterfield's arrival, Island Green, which now reports $88 million of assets under management, had made just two other bets: defense company Shield AI and robotics company Formic. Butterfield joins the growing list of Musk alumni to strike deals and launch companies in the Musk-influenced venture capital and startup world. Several of Musk's top executives have amassed $100 million, even billion-dollar fortunes. Veterans of SpaceX have so far launched 116 companies and raised $6.1 billion in venture capital, according to the SpaceX Alumni Founders website. Musk's chief of staff from 2014 until 2019, who hired Butterfield, Sam Teller, joined Valor Equity Partners, the firm run by Musk's billionaire pal and investor, Antonio Gracias, and was a partner there for 3.5 years. Unlike her former boss, Butterfield keeps a low profile. She did not return Forbes' requests for comment for this story. The 34-year-old Los Angeles native graduated cum laude in 2013 from Belmont University, a private Christian university in Nashville, with a music business degree, according to the university registrar's office. She began her career at talent agency WME, rising to the role of assistant to the head of events, according to her LinkedIn. She then jumped to Musk's team of executive assistants. For full coverage, check out John Hyatt's piece on Forbes.com. This is Kieran Meadows from Forbes. Thanks for tuning in.
Give me 7 minutes a day in the chair and I'll help you lose that beer belly. We start on March 17th. Here's the personalized plan of short chair workouts designed.
SpaceX is going to make in their takeover will be a dramatic increase in launch frequency, both with their Falcon 9 and Starship rocket systems. Here's what that looks like. In 2020, SpaceX launched the Falcon 9 27 times. In 2022, on today's episode, SpaceX is going to Mars. Blue Origin is not going to Mars, and China's mysterious space plane has just returned to Earth. Probably not from Mars. Elon Musk is talking about Mars again. And for the first time in a long time, Elon is dropping his bold predictions on us about how the SpaceX Starship will establish a human presence on Mars within the next 4 years. So this all started with Bill Ackman, the finance bro. He made a post on X about health. He wrote, "Let's make America healthy again," which Elon then responded to by writing, "SpaceX created the first fully reusable rocket stage, and much more importantly, made the reuse economically viable. Making life multiplanetary is fundamentally a cost per ton to Mars problem," which seemed off topic. Anyway, that led into some more technical information. So right now, it costs around $1 billion to send 1 ton of mass from the Earth to Mars, which is too expensive, and that needs to improve to $100,000 per ton in order to build a self-sustaining city on Mars. So that's going to require our technology to get around 10,000 times better, which Elon says is extremely difficult, but not impossible. A few minutes later, Elon elaborated on that concept a little further, doubling down one more level of quote post and writing, "The first starships to Mars will launch in 2 years when the next Earth transfer window opens. These will be uncrewed to test the reliability of landing intact on Mars." Okay, so yes, 2 years is not a very long time from now, and yes, Starship is still having some kinks worked out as of right now, but this shouldn't be particularly surprising. Elon and SpaceX have been pretty open about the idea that as soon as Starship is able to reach Mars, they are going full send. This is the whole reason they've gone through the work of designing and testing and building this rocket. They're not interested in wasting any amount of time. Now, having said that, even though Mars is the primary objective, you might remember that SpaceX has also promised Starship to NASA for the Artemis moon landing, which is also supposed to happen in 2 years. Can SpaceX do both? It's worth discussing at least.
เขาบอกงี้ว่าเขาจะมาถูกไลฟ์มากวนเชียร์
Artemis was always a kind of side quest for Starship. It's a great practical use case that would really help NASA out with their own very ambitious plan to establish a human presence on the moon. As much as people rag on Elon for being overly optimistic, I mean, NASA's Artemis plan isn't exactly the most realistic. Origin is not going to Mars, and China's mysterious space plane has just returned to Earth. Probably not from Mars. Elon Musk is talking about Mars again. And for the first time in a long time, Elon is dropping his bold predictions on us about how the SpaceX Starship will establish a human presence on Mars within the next 4 years. So this all started with Bill Ackman, the finance bro. He made a post on X about health. He wrote, "Let's make America healthy again," which Elon then responded to by writing, "SpaceX created the first fully reusable rocket stage, and much more importantly, made the reuse economically viable. Making life multiplanetary is fundamentally a cost per ton to Mars problem," which seemed off topic. Anyway, that led into some more technical information. So right now, it costs around $1 billion to send 1 ton of mass from the Earth to Mars, which is too expensive, and that needs to improve to $100,000 per ton in order to build a self-sustaining city on Mars. So that's going to require our technology to get around 10,000 times better, which Elon says is extremely difficult, but not impossible. A few minutes later, Elon elaborated on that concept a little further, doubling down one more level of quote post and writing, "The first starships to Mars will launch in 2 years when the next Earth transfer window opens. These will be uncrewed to test the reliability of landing intact on Mars." Okay, so yes, 2 years is not a very long time from now, and yes, Starship is still having some kinks worked out as of right now, but this shouldn't be particularly surprising. Elon and SpaceX have been pretty open about the idea that as soon as Starship is able to reach Mars, they are going full send. This is the whole reason they've gone through the work of designing and testing and building this rocket. They're not interested in wasting any amount of time. Now, having said that, even though Mars is the primary objective, you might remember that SpaceX has also promised Starship to NASA for the Artemis moon landing, which is also supposed to happen in 2 years. Can SpaceX do both? It's worth discussing at least. Artemis was always a kind of side quest for Starship. It's a great practical use case that would really help NASA out with their own very ambitious plan to establish a human presence on the moon. As much as people rag on Elon for being overly optimistic, I mean, NASA's Artemis plan isn't exactly the most realistic thing I've ever seen either. But it's reasonable to assume that SpaceX is looking at the Mars landing and the moon landing projects as something that can operate in parallel. I mean, we're talking about two totally different mission profiles. Landing on the moon is nothing like landing on Mars, and the lunar Starship has a primary mission to support a crew, while the Mars ships will be purely cargo transports. If anything, the Mars landing hardware should be much easier than the lunar hardware, and probably wouldn't take much away from Artemis. If there even is an Artemis crew landing, I mean, at this point it seems almost equally as questionable as Elon's whole Mars landing. Of course, it's not like Starship doesn't have its own part to play in the Artemis 3 timeline slippage. There has definitely been some progress in the rocket's design over the course of 4 test flights, and I feel like we really need to see what happens on Flight 5 before making any judgments about where Starship is at in its development process. If the next ship comes back down and lands without getting shredded by re-entry, and if the next booster is
เมื่อวานเพชรเหรอ
วันนี้ไอ้พริกเขาใช่นะ
down and lands without getting shredded by re-entry, and
ดีจักว่าไม่ได้ส่งคนอื่นนะเดี๋ยวเคลียร์ทำให้แค่นี้เลยอะ
if the next booster is caught by a robot launch tower without exploding, then I think even the most skeptical voices would have to admit that SpaceX is really onto something here. One inescapable complication that needs to be acknowledged, though, is just the sheer volume of Starship operations that would be required to send at least 2 ships to Mars and at least 2 ships to the moon. That would be 1 demo landing and 1 crewed landing for Artemis, all within the next 2 years. If we keep the number of fuel transfer missions at an even 10 per Starship in order to depart low Earth orbit, now we're at over 40 Starship launches with full payload on board just to support these 2 objectives. And that doesn't accomplish any of the other goals SpaceX might have for Starship, such as deploying Starlink, which Elon has also said is so important that if Starship didn't start launching Starlink at a high flight rate within a year, then SpaceX is at a genuine risk of going bankrupt. And that was 3 years ago. Anyway, Elon had even more to say. He also wrote, if these landings go well, then the first crewed flights to Mars will be in 4 years. So if we do it once without crashing, then the next trip around is going to be loaded with some brave volunteers. Luckily for those eager to offer themselves up as tribute, those first landings would be highly unlikely to go well. That's not a knock against SpaceX or their ability to accomplish impossible goals. It's just an observation of their own history that seems to show they need to screw it up a few times before they eventually get it right, which is fine. That's totally normal product development, and I'm sure we'll hear from Elon himself many times that success is far from certain. Here's the last bit of Elon's post. Flight rate will grow exponentially from there, with the goal of building a self-sustaining city in about 20 years. Being multiplanetary will vastly increase the probable lifespan of consciousness, as we will no longer have all of our eggs, literally and metabolically, on one planet. Of course, there's nothing new involved here. This is stuff we've heard Musk say many times before, but it's also the first time in a while he specifically laid out an up-to-date timeline. We know a lot more about the realities of Starship and spaceflight now than we did 10 years ago when Elon started talking about all this stuff. And Clearly, his level of confidence in Starship to deliver a lot of results in a short amount of time, it's just as high as ever. What do you think, though? NASA has officially removed their Escapade payload from the inaugural launch of the Blue Origin New Glenn rocket, and there's something weird going on here. The agency announced on September 6th that it will halt pre-launch preparations for the twin Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamics Explorers satellites. The spacecraft were scheduled to launch on the first flight of the New Glenn between October 13th and 21st from Cape Canaveral in Florida. The reasoning cited by NASA is all about timelines. If Escapade is going to launch in a month, then NASA needs to begin loading the spacecraft with hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide fuel right about now. But if they go ahead with the prep of the spacecraft, and then Blue Origin has to delay New Glenn for whatever reason, then NASA has to go through the process of detanking that spacecraft. An official statement from NASA reads, the decision was made to avoid significant cost, schedule, and technical challenges associated with potentially removing fuel from the spacecraft.
ยังไม่ได้เอาไปนะใช้ก็สุดทำไงอะไรมันทับหรือว่ามันตกลงไปข้างล่างเปล่า
in the event of a launch delay, which could be caused by a number of factors. Of course, Blue Origin is still very confident that everything will go to plan and New Glenn will be fully prepared for launch in less than a month from now. We've seen Jeff Bezos doing the rounds in the media promoting Blue Origin and showing off their progress, mostly on the Everyday Astronaut channel. They didn't ask us if we wanted to collaborate, probably because we said very mean things about Jeff in the past. Anyway, here's where things get weird though. Instead of trying to quickly shuffle to a different rocket provider, NASA says that they still want to launch Escapade on New Glenn. But now they're going to wait until September 2025 to So in theory, that means that they're going to miss the home and transfer window by several months, meaning that Escapade won't be taking the shortest path between the two planets. So the trajectory of the mission will be pretty significantly changed from what it was originally intended to be. Not that this would be impossible. We've known all along that Escapade is severely undersized for the power and capability of New Glenn, so there's probably a decent amount of wiggle room in the flight trajectory. They may be behind schedule by a few months, but theoretically, New Glenn can just push harder and make up the difference. NASA spokesperson Sarah Fraser told SpaceNews.com, quote, "The window depends on the spacecraft and mission characteristics as well as the capabilities of the rocket." Blue Origin themselves released only a vague statement saying, "We are supportive of NASA's decision to target the Escapade mission for no earlier than spring 2025 and look forward to the flight." The company said that the first flight of New Glenn will instead carry unspecified technology for its Blue Ring orbital transfer vehicle. And Flight 1 will also serve as the certification launch for the Space Force's National Security Space Launch Program. The Space Force certification was originally intended to be on the second flight of New Glenn, which was scheduled for December, but the company now says they'll move that launch up to November with no further details provided. So, first launch of New Glenn in October with the Blue Ring payload, second launch in November with an unspecified payload, and then another launch in the spring with Escapade. That's a lot of hype to live up to there. through.
Hello.
China's
Where you come from, my friend?
experimental reusable spaceplane returned to Earth on September 5th, completing its third orbital mission. Chinese state media issued a brief report to confirm the landing, but provided no images or information regarding the mission, or even the site of said landing. A statement from the report reads, "Success of the experiment demonstrates the growing maturity of China's reusable spacecraft technologies, which will pave the way for more convenient and affordable round-trip methods for the peaceful use of space in the future." The spaceplane has been operating in low Earth orbit since being launched on a Long March 2F rocket for the third time last December. Probably not by coincidence, that event happened 2 weeks before the launch of America's X-37B spaceplane on a Falcon Heavy rocket. That also went to an undisclosed orbit. China's spaceplane is thought to be more or less a reproduction of the X-37B. All Chinese spaceplane missions have involved releasing a small satellite or object into orbit. The second and third missions have seen the spacecraft appear to conduct a rendezvous and proximity operations with the object it released. We're not sure what they're practicing for up there, but it could involve retrieving, repairing, and maintaining Chinese satellites. Or potentially intercepting and screwing around with other nations' spacecraft. It's hard to say because China has maintained strict security around these missions. The country's space authorities haven't even released any official images or even a description of the spacecraft.
From our earliest days in school, we've been programmed to focus and pay attention when someone writes on a whiteboard. You may doubt it's really like that.
In 2020, Elon Musk confidentially declared that his company would land the first human on Mars by 2026. It's now 2024. From what we can see, Musk hasn't had any luck. And with just 2 years remaining until his predicted date, the prospect of In 2020, Elon Musk confidentially declared that his company would land the first human on Mars by 2026. It's now 2024. From what we can see, Musk hasn't had any luck. And with just 2 years remaining until his predicted date, the prospect of seeing a human on Mars is, to put it mildly, unlikely. Meanwhile, NASA seems to be in no hurry. They're just now planning missions to the moon, again. But even these missions are constantly being postponed. So what went wrong? In this video, you'll learn why is it so hard to travel to Mars from Earth? Why have we already traveled to the moon, but not yet to Mars? How and when is it planned to travel to Mars? How are we going to conquer Mars? Please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating educational content. What does conquering Mars even mean? For most people, this means at the very least to have a person fly there and plant a flag, or to build a base with regularly rotating staff like on the ISS, or even to terraform Mars, that is to deliberately change its conditions so much that it would resemble Earth. Whatever people dream about, for now, even flying there and planting a flag is an extremely challenging task. It would be a great achievement if the first interplanetary astronauts managed to reach the red planet, land and successfully return to Earth. Successfully means alive and preferably more or less healthy. But why is it so difficult? After all, people went to the moon several times more than half a century ago. Because sending a person to Mars is, to put it mildly, not the same as going to the moon. This task is incomparably harder. And now we'll show you just how vast this difference is. Let's take a step back to fully comprehend this. A human first set foot on the moon on July 20th, 1969. And this wasn't a symbolic mission just to plant a flag. People worked there. There were 6 manned missions in total, and 12 people were lucky enough to walk on its surface. It took just 7 years from the goal's announcement in 1962 to the landing of a human on the moon, which is incredibly fast. The question is, what's wrong with Mars? Why hasn't a single person been there in more than half a century? Despite all his optimism, even Elon Musk said in an interview with entrepreneur and space adventurers co-owner Peter Diamandis, honestly, a bunch of people will probably die in the beginning.
Honestly, a bunch of people probably will die in the beginning. It's tough sledding over there. We're an exploring species.
So, what makes it so difficult? Imagine that you need to walk to a shopping mall 1 kilometre, about 0.6 miles away from your home and back. It would take you about half an hour, or you could comfortably make the trip in slippers and you probably wouldn't get very tired. You certainly wouldn't need to bring sandwiches to have a snack on the way. Now imagine having to walk not 1 kilometre, 0.6 miles, but 140 kilometres, 87 miles, plus the same distance back. That's more than a beeline from New York to Philadelphia. Keep in mind that this route would go through uninhabited terrain with no roads, stores or people. A regular person wouldn't be able to cover this distance in a day or 2. If there are no stores along the way, you'd need to carry food, water, medicine tools and a raincoat, a sleeping bag and a tent, because there would be nowhere to buy supplies on the way. If such a traveller breaks a leg halfway, then they're almost certainly doomed. This is roughly how a flight to Mars compares to a flight to the moon, only many times worse. The distance to the moon is stable, 384,400 kilometres, about 238,855 miles, while Mars is at least 56 million kilometres, about 34.8 million miles away, which is about 140 times further than the moon. This is the minimum value because this distance constantly keeps changing, given that planets orbit the Sun at different speeds. At some point, Earth and Mars can end up on opposite sides of the Sun. Then the distance will reach 400 million kilometres, about 248.5 million miles. That's 1,000 times farther than the distance between the Moon and the Earth. In our example with a hiker, this is like walking from New York to Chicago. Mind you, all of this is on foot, and we emphasise on foot for a reason, considering the size of our solar system and the universe as a whole. The current human space travel is almost snail-paced. With modern technology, a one-way flight to Mars will take 7 months or even nearly a year. That's because of the distance. The enormous distance is the main issue with a manned mission to Mars, and all other problems come from it. There are plenty of those problems too. During all these months, the crew needs to eat and drink, keep their bodies clean, monitor their health, and perform many daily tasks. They also need to get along with each other in a confined space. All this would happen in a setting with numerous threats, breakdowns, cosmic radiation, and no chance of receiving help from Earth. Even getting simple advice from specialists on Earth will be delayed by 10 or even 20 minutes, depending on the current distance. Can we somehow assess in advance the likelihood of such a mission's success? Well, see for yourself. In over 60 years, 48 missions have been sent towards Mars, including those that didn't even involve landing a probe or rover. Of these, 26 failed. Even the chances of an unmanned mission's success are almost 50-50. You see, even unmanned. Considering all of this, Elon Musk's words about the likely deaths of the first Mars explorers sound frighteningly convincing. And keep in mind that this is coming from Musk, who is widely known for his optimistic take on Mars exploration. But no matter what, humanity does not intend to give up. Therefore, we will stop pessimistic thoughts for today and move on to how the optimists plan to get to Mars. Let's take this journey along with them. First, we'll see how NASA, the most iconic space agency in the world, sees this. So, the first problem is actually taking off, getting out of Earth's powerful gravitational pull. Now, this all depends on how much equipment needs to be taken along. Take a look at this space shuttle that performed manned missions to Earth's orbit. It's a huge rocket, 56 meters, about 183 feet long. But even it looks like a toy compared to the Saturn V that delivered manned missions to the moon. One can only imagine what a monstrous rocket one would need to lift all the enormous supplies and equipment required for an Earth to Mars mission. To get this into perspective, let's go back to our example with the hiker from the start of the video and complicate it a little bit. Imagine you need to walk those very same 140 kilometers, about 87 miles, through uninhabited terrain with a full supply of food, water, and everything else in your huge, heavy backpack. And now, here's the kicker. The path will be off-road, but on flat terrain. However, the first kilometre must be covered on a very steep slope. So steep that you might not make it to the top. And even if you do, you might collapse at the top, unable to go any further. This roughly describes a scenario of starting a mission to Mars directly from Earth. It's almost impossible to build a rocket that can lift a giant load in one go, fly to Mars with it, and then return. Not to mention landing people on the surface. That's why NASA decided that the first manned mission to Mars won't start from Earth. It makes much more sense to start from a place where there is no strong Earth gravity. Currently, the most accessible option for humanity is to transport all the necessary spacecraft parts, fuel and cargo to orbit in several launches, assemble everything there, and then start the mission. However, NASA decided to go one step further by building a base on the moon and, simultaneously, a space station in lunar orbit. The idea is that if the spacecraft is launched from space where there's zero gravity, it wouldn't be such an insurmountable task to start the mission to Mars. The station itself can be built in several stages, as the task can be broken down into parts. This is like in our example with the hiker. First, you'd run several times up the mentioned slope to carry provisions, water, and everything else during several trips. You'd then store it all in a simple but built in advance and only then set off with a heavy backpack, but on flat terrain. Actually, this is a very serious program that has been in development for several years. It's called Artemis, and there has already been a successful flight within its framework. No, we haven't missed anything. People haven't returned to the moon yet, but humanity is now closer to this goal than it has been in the past 50 years. The Artemis program includes many stages. So far, only the first stage has been successfully completed. In November 2022, NASA launched the SLS rocket, which was designed based on technologies of the Saturn V rocket and reusable space shuttle ships. It delivered the Orion spacecraft to the moon, which was sent without a crew for the first mission. It orbited the moon and safely returned to Earth. This was the Artemis 1 mission. Artemis 2 will follow the same route, but with a crew in September 2025. According to the plan, astronauts will fly to the moon without landing. During this mission, they'll confirm that all spacecraft systems are fully functional in deep space conditions. The flight is expected to take 10 days, which includes orbiting the moon. The Artemis 3 mission will involve landing astronauts on the moon for the first time in half a century. The Orion spacecraft is not designed to land on the moon, so the lunar spaceship module developed by SpaceX will be used for this task. Orion and the lunar starship module will meet in lunar orbit. Then the astronauts will transfer to the lunar starship for the descent to the lunar surface. The astronauts will spend about 7 days on the moon exploring the South Pole region and establishing a base. This mission will set a record for the longest human stay on the moon, surpassing the 72-hour mission of Apollo 17. The internal volume of the lunar Starship module will provide much more comfort compared to the Apollo mission vehicles. During the mission, 2 astronauts will conduct several moonwalks, performing various scientific observations, including collecting samples of water ice. Let's try to look even further into the future, when the red planet will be within our arm's reach, in every sense of the word. During Artemis 4, the active stage of constructing the Lunar Gateway Station will begin. This orbital station will go around the moon and serve as an intermediate point for missions to the lunar surface and eventually to Mars. The first step is the launch of 2 key modules of the future station, the Power and Propulsion Element, PPE, and the Habitation and Logistics Outpost, HALO, on the Falcon Heavy rocket, scheduled for 2027. They'll be sent into space in a single cluster.
พีคห้องหนูใช้กันได้กันนะจริงเหรอเย้โอเคเดี๋ยวเชิญเข้ามาในไลฟ์สดอยากเห็นหน้าพีคดีไหมครับเย้ใช้ได้แล้วดีใจมากเลยมันจะใช้ได้ไปทำยังไงให้มันใช้ได้No for people ดีค่ะโอเคครับทุกคนเดี๋ยวเชื่อกองไลฟ์ก่อนนะวันนั้นหนูไปร้านกับเพื่อนโอเคทุกคนเดี๋ยวเชื่อกองไลฟ์ก่อนเดี๋ยวเชื่อไลฟ์ใหม่เดี๋ยวเชื่อจะเชิญพีคเข้ามาในไลฟ์สดบ๊ายบาย